Welcome. On this channel, you won't find flashy animations or expensive visual effects, because what matters here isn't the visuals, it's the story, and every great football story deserves to be told. Speed, power, a left foot capable of producing magic. For more than a decade, Gareth Bale was one of the most electrifying footballers on the planet. He scored goals that seemed impossible, won trophies that most players only dream about, and carried an entire nation on his shoulders. But his story was never simple. Behind the breathtaking runs and unforgettable goals were injuries, criticism, controversy, and constant pressure. Some saw him as a hero, others saw him as a disappointment. Yet few players have left a mark on modern football quite like Gareth Bale. This is the story of the boy from Cardiff who became a global superstar, and the man who refused to live by anyone else's expectations. Long before the sold-out stadiums, before Real Madrid, before Champions League finals, there was a young boy in Cardiff, a boy who seemed different from everyone around him. Gareth Bale was born on July 16, 1989. From an early age, one thing stood out immediately: his speed. It wasn't normal. Teachers struggled to find anyone who could keep up with him. Classmates watched in disbelief as he outran older children with ease. Whether it was football, rugby, hockey, or athletics, Bale always seemed to be faster than everyone else. One of his physical education teachers would later remember something remarkable. Sometimes, they had to create special rules, just to keep competitions fair, because if Gareth Bale ran at full speed, nobody else stood a chance. But speed alone doesn't create greatness. What truly separated Gareth from other children was obsession. He loved improving, loved competing, loved pushing himself further. While most kids eventually went home, Bale stayed outside, practicing, running, kicking a ball against walls for hours, repeating the same movements again and again, until they became perfect. His dream wasn't fame, his dream was football, and football soon began to notice him. At just 9 years old, scouts from Southampton identified something special. Not just an athlete, a future professional. Years later, while many teenagers were still dreaming about professional football, Bale was already preparing for life at the highest level. At 16 years old, he made his professional debut for Southampton. 16. Most players his age were still dreaming about professional football. Bale was already living it. The football world quickly took notice. A tall teenager, lightning fast, fearless, capable of scoring spectacular goals from set pieces. It didn't take long for bigger clubs to start paying attention, and one club in particular believed they had found the future: Tottenham Hotspur. For Bale, it felt like the beginning of everything. In reality, it would become one of the most difficult periods of his entire career. When Gareth Bale arrived at Tottenham Hotspur in 2007, the future looked bright. He was one of the most exciting young talents in Britain. Fast, fearless, gifted. Many believed Spurs had just signed a future superstar. But football has a cruel way of testing people, and Gareth Bale was about to learn that lesson the hard way. At first, everything seemed normal. He showed flashes of brilliance, scored impressive goals, earned praise from fans and pundits alike. Then something strange started happening. Tottenham couldn't win when Bale played. One match became two, two became five, five became 10. The numbers kept growing and growing and growing. Every time Bale started a Premier League game, Tottenham failed to win. It became one of the strangest records in English football. 24 league matches, 24 games without a victory. The statistics were impossible to ignore. Fans started joking about a curse. Some supporters genuinely believed Bale was bad luck. Others questioned whether he was good enough for the Premier League. The criticism became louder. The pressure became heavier. For a young player still trying to establish himself, it could have been devastating. Many careers have ended under far less scrutiny, but Gareth Bale refused to break. Instead of complaining, he worked. Instead of making excuses, he improved. While critics focused on results, Bale focused on becoming a better footballer. And slowly, things began to change. A new manager arrived. Harry Redknapp saw something different. He looked beyond the statistics, beyond the headlines, beyond the so-called curse. He saw potential, real potential. Redknapp made an important decision. Rather than using Bale primarily as a left-back, he pushed him further forward, closer to the opposition goal, closer to where his speed could become a weapon. It changed everything. Suddenly, defenders faced a completely different challenge. Stopping Gareth Bale became almost impossible. He was taller, faster, stronger, more direct. Every week he looked more dangerous. Every week his confidence grew. And then came the night that changed his life forever. October 2010, UEFA Champions League, Tottenham Hotspur versus Inter Milan. Inter weren't just another team. They were the reigning champions of Europe, a squad filled with world-class players, and on the right side of their defense stood one of the best fullbacks in football. Macon, strong, experienced, respected. Many believed he was unbeatable. Gareth Bale disagreed. That night, the football world witnessed something extraordinary. Again and again, Bale attacked. Again and again, he accelerated. Again and again, Macon struggled to stop him. Every sprint felt like an explosion. Every touch created panic. Every attack pushed Tottenham closer. Even though Spurs lost the match, 4-3, nobody was talking about the result afterward. They were talking about Bale. His hat trick stunned Europe. For 90 minutes, he had turned one of the world's best defenders into a spectator. The football world suddenly realized something. This wasn't just a talented young player anymore. This was a future superstar. The curse was gone. The doubters were silent, and the rise of Gareth Bale had truly begun. But the best was still to come, because over the next few years, he would transform from a rising star into the most expensive footballer on earth. The night against Inter Milan changed everything. Almost overnight, Gareth Bale went from a promising young player to one of the most feared attackers in world football. Defenders knew what was coming. They knew he wanted to run past them. They knew he wanted to cut inside. They knew he wanted to shoot. And yet, they still couldn't stop him. Season after season, Bale continued to improve. His pace became even more devastating. His shooting more powerful. His confidence unstoppable. At Tottenham, he was no longer just another player. He had become the team's biggest weapon. Whenever Spurs needed a moment of magic, they looked to Gareth Bale. And more often than not, he delivered. Then came the 2012-13 season, the season that changed his life forever. By now, Bale wasn't simply one of the best players in England. He was becoming one of the best players in the world. Week after week, he carried Tottenham forward, scoring goals from impossible angles, winning matches almost by himself, producing moments that left fans speechless. One of those moments came against West Ham. With seconds remaining, Bale picked up the ball more than 30 yards from goal. Most players would have looked for a pass. Bale had a different idea. He unleashed a thunderous strike. The ball flew into the net. Tottenham won. The stadium exploded. It was the kind of goal that only special players can score. Then he did it again, and again, against Southampton, against Norwich, against anyone who stood in his way. Every week seemed to bring another masterpiece. The football world couldn't stop talking about him. Neither could the awards. At the end of the season, Bale won the PFA Players' Player of the Year, the Football Writers' Player of the Year, and the Premier League Young Player of the Year. A clean sweep, an achievement reserved for only the very best. He was just 23 years old, and suddenly, the biggest clubs in Europe were watching. One club in particular had already made up its mind: Real Madrid. For years, the Spanish giants had built teams filled with superstars. Now they wanted Gareth Bale. The negotiations became one of the biggest transfer sagas in football history. For weeks, rumors dominated headlines. Every newspaper, every television channel, every football discussion. One question remained: would Bale leave Tottenham? The answer arrived in the summer of 2013. Real Madrid made their move. The fee was astonishing: Nearly 100 million euros, a figure so large that it shocked the football world. At the time, it was widely reported as the biggest transfer fee ever paid for a footballer. The pressure was enormous. When you cost that much money, people expect greatness. Anything less feels like failure. The day he arrived at the Santiago Bernabeu, thousands of fans filled the stadium. They welcomed him like a superstar. Standing there in the famous white shirt, Bale looked calm, but everyone knew the challenge ahead. Real Madrid wasn't just another club. It was football's biggest stage. Every performance would be judged, every mistake analyzed, every success celebrated around the world. Some players thrive under that pressure, others disappear. The question wasn't whether Gareth Bale was talented enough. The question was whether he could handle the expectations. Nobody knew the answer, not yet. But within a year, he would produce one of the most unforgettable moments in football history, a goal so extraordinary that fans still talk about it today. When Gareth Bale arrived at Real Madrid, the expectations were impossible to ignore. Nearly 100 million euros, one of the biggest transfers football had ever seen. Every touch was analyzed, every mistake criticized, every performance compared to the greatest players in the world. For some footballers, that pressure would have been overwhelming. For Bale, it became fuel. His first season in Spain wasn't perfect. There were injuries. There were doubts. There were questions about whether he could truly justify his price tag. But when the biggest moments arrived, so did Gareth Bale. April 16th, 2014. The Copa del Rey Final. Real Madrid, Barcelona. The biggest rivalry in football. The score was level. The clock was ticking down. One moment could decide everything. Then it happened. Bale received the ball near the halfway line. Standing between him and goal was Marc Bartra. Young, fast, determined. At first, it looked like Bartra had stopped him. He forced Bale toward the touchline, away from danger, away from goal, away from glory. Most players would have slowed down. Most players would have looked for a pass. Most players would have accepted defeat. Bale did something different. He accelerated. Suddenly, he wasn't running around Bartra. He was running around reality itself. For a split second, Bale actually left the field of play. Then he exploded forward. Bartra tried to keep up. He couldn't. Nobody could. It looked impossible. Like something from a video game. A sprint powered by pure speed, pure determination, pure belief. Within seconds, he was through on goal. One touch, one finish, one unforgettable moment. The ball hit the net. The stadium erupted. Real Madrid players exploded with joy. And football had a new iconic image. A player sprinting beyond the limits of the field to win a trophy. It wasn't just a goal, it was a statement. Gareth Bale belonged at Real Madrid, but an even bigger challenge awaited, the UEFA Champions League Final, Real Madrid versus Atletico Madrid. For 12 years, Madrid had chased one dream, La Decima, the club's 10th European Cup. 90 minutes away, one final obstacle. The match was brutal, tense, emotional, exhausting. Then the breakthrough came, and once again, Bale was there. His header gave Madrid the lead, the turning point, the goal that helped open the floodgates. Real Madrid won. La Decima was finally theirs. In his very first season, Bale had already delivered two of the most important goals in modern Real Madrid history. The critics began to disappear. The trophies kept arriving, and soon, one of football's most feared attacking trios was born. Cristiano Ronaldo, Karim Benzema, Gareth Bale, BBC, 3 players. One mission, dominate Europe. And that's exactly what they did. Champions League titles, historic victories, football immortality. But football careers are never simple. Behind the trophies, another battle was beginning, one that couldn't be won with speed, or power, or talent. Injuries were starting to take their toll, and the relationship between Gareth Bale and Real Madrid was beginning to change. For years, Gareth Bale had delivered on football's biggest stages. He had won trophies, scored decisive goals, and helped build one of the greatest teams of the modern era. But behind the success, a different story was unfolding. A story filled with injuries, frustration, and growing tension. Every season seemed to follow the same pattern. Bale would return, play brilliantly, then suffer another setback, a calf injury, a muscle problem, a hamstring strain, again and again and again. The absences began to pile up. So did the criticism. Spanish newspapers attacked him relentlessly. Every missed match became a headline. Every injury became a debate. Every mistake became front-page news. For the first time in his career, Gareth Bale wasn't fighting defenders. He was fighting perception. And perception can be far more difficult to beat. Yet despite all the criticism, when the biggest nights arrived, Bale always found a way. Which brings us to May 26, 2018, Kyiv, Ukraine, the UEFA Champions League Final, Real Madrid, Liverpool. The eyes of the football world were watching. And surprisingly, Gareth Bale wasn't in the starting lineup. For a player of his stature, it felt like a disappointment, a sign, many believed, that he was no longer one of Madrid's most trusted stars. Then came the 61st minute. Zinedine Zidane turned to his bench. Bale's number appeared. The Welshman entered the game. Nobody could have imagined what would happen next. Just 2 minutes later, Marcelo delivered a cross. The ball floated through the air. For a brief moment, time seemed to stop. Then Gareth Bale leaped. His body twisted, his eyes locked on the ball, and in one impossible motion, he struck it. Silence, then disbelief, then chaos. The ball flew into the top corner, one of the greatest goals ever scored in a Champions League final. Players stood frozen. Fans stared in shock. Commentators struggled to find words. Even years later, the goal still feels unreal. A moment of perfection, a moment of genius, a moment that defined a career. Real Madrid won the final, another Champions League trophy, another unforgettable night. And once again, Gareth Bale had delivered when it mattered most. But strangely, the relationship between Bale and Madrid never fully recovered. The criticism continued, the tension remained. Then came one of the most controversial moments of his entire career. November 2019. Wales had just qualified for Euro 2020. The celebrations were underway. Players gathered with supporters, flags appeared, photographs were taken. And among those flags was one message: Wales, golf, Madrid, in that order. The phrase exploded around the world. Many Madrid fans saw it as betrayal, proof, they claimed, that Bale cared more about golf than football. The media attacked him once again, but Gareth Bale never seemed interested in changing for other people. That was one of the things that made him different. For better or worse, he lived life on his own terms. He wasn't trying to be Cristiano Ronaldo. He wasn't trying to be Sergio Ramos. He wasn't trying to be anyone else. He was simply Gareth Bale, quiet, private, different, and completely comfortable with that. Eventually, every journey reaches its conclusion. For Bale, that final chapter arrived with Wales, the nation he had carried for so many years, the nation he had transformed for decades. Wales had watched World Cups from home. Generations of supporters had dreamed of seeing their country return to football's biggest stage. Gareth Bale made that dream a reality. In 2022, Wales qualified for their first World Cup since 1958. 64 years of waiting, 64 years of hope, finally rewarded. In the opening match against the United States, Bale scored from the penalty spot. One final gift, one final moment. Months later, he made his decision. No farewell tour, no dramatic press conference, no grand goodbye, just a simple announcement. After an extraordinary career, Gareth Bale was retiring from football. And just like that, one of the most explosive players of his generation walked away. People will remember the trophies, 5 Champions League titles, historic goals, unforgettable nights. But numbers never tell the whole story, because Gareth Bale was more than statistics. He was speed, he was excitement, he was unpredictability, the player capable of producing magic when nobody expected it. Some fans will remember the run against Barcelona, Others will remember the bicycle kick in Kiev, and many in Wales will remember the man who carried an entire nation back to the World Cup. But perhaps the most remarkable thing about Gareth Bale is that he never tried to become what others wanted him to be. He followed his own path, made his own choices, accepted the criticism, and stayed true to himself. Because legends aren't remembered for being perfect. They're remembered for being unforgettable. And Gareth Bale was exactly that, unforgettable.